Good evening, everybody. Welcome to both our Zoom participants and I got to fix the screen here, and to the audience here. Just to let the Zoom people know, we do have living, breathing human beings here in this room, so we're very happy to share this evening with everybody. And even with each other. We haven't got to see each other very much over the last 3 years, so it's a reunion of types. So as most of you know, Wellness Through Mindfulness was started in 2015. Initially here we met, and then with the pandemic, we started to meet on Zoom. And then we have bravely returned to in-person meetings, but hybrid with Zoom because of people's natural, some people will naturally prefer the Zoom way of connecting. We do meet on the first and third Thursdays of each month. And our aim, the reason we formed this group, was to provide free teachings on mindfulness and related topics. Phil was the main engine and still is the main engine behind us. He's also extremely well organized, which is very important for any group to function well. So we appreciate that. And the three of us are all physicians, but Christine, who's one of our core members, is not a physician, so we do share with non-physicians. Phil has started a website. Do you know what year you put your website together?
Oh God, the Breath Project one?
Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it was before 2015.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So he has a website.
2003, I can't remember.
2003. It's called thebreathproject.org. And okay, do you want to, we have to admit those people. That has some animated videos about mindfulness and interviews with some mindfulness experts. And then he started this Wellness Through Mindfulness, as I think, as he said before, mainly inspired by his medical practice, where he was seeing, he was a gastroenterologist, now he's retired. As we know, there's lots of neuroendocrine stuff going on in the guts, and he noticed that people came to him with gut issues that he thought were a lot to do with their inner life, their emotions, their feelings, and so on. And he had been a meditator for many years and wanted to try to share that in a format that would be accessible to many people. So on the WTM website, we have videos of our talks, and we have reminders about events, posters about events, a place where you can sign up, and we can recommend that to you. We like to tell you about our upcoming talks. So the next time I'm going to be talking on deepening your mindfulness meditation practice. So it will be a session where we really learn how to pay attention to a single object. And I've been taking an 8-month course myself on deepening meditation. So I've been very inspired by my teacher, and I want to pass that on to you. So that's what we'll be doing. And then on June 1st, we are joined by Anne Mahoney, but that session will only be on Zoom. We will not be meeting here. And she's going to talk about research to do with loving kindness practice and compassion meditation, and how it's been shown to affect physical health, psychological health, and brain health. So we do encourage you, if you have not already, to sign up on our website to receive our notices, because then it'll help you to remember what's coming up. We will have a Q&A session at the end of about an hour of Allan's presentation. And during that session, you are very welcome to ask any questions you may have, and this includes our Zoom audience. The Zoom audience can type it into the chat, and then I will say it out loud so everybody knows what it is. And if you guys ask a question, I'll say it out loud to the Zoom people so they can hear it. We do want to remind you that this is a forum for education. It's our intention to provide information that is more general and not to address personal issues. So we would encourage you to ask questions related to tonight's topic or anything in general about mindfulness. but we are not acting in our professional capacities. And particularly we want to put Allan on the spot because he is a psychiatrist. So, but he's not on the clock for that job tonight, right, Allan? We do ask for donations because we have technical costs for our technical person. He's very skilled and we want to reward him, and we don't know how to do it, so we have to pay him how to do his job. He keeps track of our notices and uploads our videos, and if we were younger, we'd probably know how to do it, but we're relying on him to do it for us. So we have a donation basket at the back of the room, and we also have a donation button on our website. We generally ask for about $5, but if you want to do different than that, that's fine too. So none of the speakers are paid. We're all volunteers. All of the organization is volunteer work. So some of you may already know Allan, but I'll remind those who don't, or let people who don't know him, that he was a pediatrician, and then he became a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And actually the first time I met Allan was at a medication talk on ADD. So he presented on attention deficit disorder about medication treatment. He was a very good speaker, and he still is a very skillful speaker. He presents a lot of workshops and facilitates at schools, universities, conferences, and in the business world. And I know also that Allan is interested in writing and doing some writing, and he personally lives his interest in mindfulness. What he has written is that he uses it to navigate the human experience, integrating mind, heart, spirit, and soul. He is interested in mythology and has a quest for understanding what it means to be human. He uses peace, beauty, and joy as guides to improve the quality of his being while he's doing his doing. And he is presenting tonight on the topic Mindful Listening, Attending to the Silence of the Heart. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Allan. Without spilling anything.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you all for those of you online and those here in person this evening. In thinking about tonight, the matters of the heart, I am going to run with a longer meditation tonight. And every time I present something in this realm, I start with the experience, because that's really what people are looking for. We're really looking for some sense of an experience of what this is like. The intellect is fine, the cognition, the understanding, the reading, the research, all that is well and good. But tonight we're going to do a longer, I call it a drop-in, and lead you through a meditation into the heart and into what can seem to be empty and vast and silent, but in fact is full of potential. And then afterwards, I'll give a talk. So we're going to be below the neck, as I call it, for the first part, the experience. And afterwards, we'll have a talk and chat and questions and conversation and so forth. Once again, feel free to type questions in the chat box. Leslie will moderate afterwards. We've got lots of time. There's no rush. And for those of you who are comfortable to do so, making any adjustments to your chair, or if you're lying down at home, to your body. And every moment, I start with permission. And permission is very important. We permit ourselves to set an intention. And with intention, we align our priorities of the moment and in the moment. And so our intention now, and for however long this is going to be, we're just practicing mindfulness, which involves a certain quality of curiosity. And for the purposes of this evening, we're going inwards. We live half of our life in a world out there, as we call it, things to be done, actions, the visible activities of the day or the night. And of course, there's the other half of our world, which is the inner world. Now, the mind is used to going outwards, looking at what's going on, getting caught up in stories about what's coming, what was today. And when that happens, it's not really a distraction. That's actually the mindful moment when we bring our attention back to just dropping in. So the fact that you can notice traffic noises or people on the tennis court, or your own thoughts or your tummy gurgling, that's fine. We're not trying to shut down anything. We're just trying to redirect our attention. And there are a couple of useful anchors that can help us on the journey inwards. And the first is the body. Just allowing the body as it is to take center stage of your awareness. It may be a sense of the body as a whole, or the contact of feet on the floor, or the back of your legs and the buttocks on the chair, or your back on the back of the chair, or your arms, or the air on your skin. It doesn't matter. Just with permission, being aware of the body. And as always, if at any time something's not working for you or doesn't fit, you are in charge of your experience at any moment. If your eyes are closed and it's too intense and you want to open them, by all means. If you want to get up and walk while you're doing this, that's fine too. This isn't about pushing or trying to get anywhere. It's about listening carefully to what needs are asking to be met in the moment. And as we pay attention to the body, we can tune in a little more to the breath. That good friend of ours. And the body has an incredible wisdom. Billions and billions of little chemical activities and electrical activities going on every moment, way beyond our control. Every part of your body doing what it knows how to do. And just allowing the breath to be an inner anchor, or rather a guide, floating in and out on the breath. And at any point through this sit, if you become aware of trying to analyze or control anything, or think about it, or you find yourself in some other place other than now, quietly and gently, just escort your attention back. You can even say, "Thank you, thinking mind, for doing your job. Right now, my intention is to drop in more deeply." You can take it easy. And just allowing yourself with permission and intention to just experience whatever is showing up. Noticing the flow. Perhaps noticing, even for a moment, or even if it's very subtle, that the activities of the outside world seem a little different or quieter. They haven't gone away, but somehow there's a sense of being in a different relationship with them. And rather than trying to put it into words, you can just be with it in a very open way. And zooming in a little further, you can bring your attention to your heart. Initially, the physical heart, which is so close to the breath, cuddled and held between the lungs. And the first port of call of every breath, and the beautiful oxygen we breathe in, the first port of call after the lungs is the heart. And the heart is only the size of your fist, but it's such a central, and it's right at the core of your being. And there are a number of words which have the same root in Latin. Core, care, charity or caritas, and cardiac. They all have the C something R. And just sensing, intuiting what it is that those words have in common. Heart, care, core, charity. And the word courage. And we seem to have perhaps, in some sense, crossed a threshold into a place where regular language doesn't work. The world where the shape of the heart represents love. And there are more songs written about love or hurt when love is broken. So we've got falling in love songs and breakup songs. We talk metaphorically, the heart of the matter, at the core of the issue. It's in our everyday language. We all care about things. We all want a kinder, more charitable world. Charity starts at home. So there's something here about our relationship with ourselves. And our words struggle to not only describe what this experience is, but words fail. Words are merely a pointer to something we experience, we know, we intuit, we sense, we feel. We're in the language of poetry here. And the challenge for many of us, for all of us, I propose, is that the heart is also the place where we carry wounds and hurt and disappointment and fear. We tighten up in our chest. We have a hard time swallowing. We get butterflies in the tummy. It almost feels like it's in the heart. We even call it heartburn because it just sits there when we've suffered. So for many of us, the tough stuff, the yucky stuff, we don't want to go there. Because it's not pleasant. We don't want to touch the coal because we fear we're going to get burnt. So we often stay away from the heart because we can feel it's just too much to bear. And COVID has made what was a universal human instinct to avoid, it's just amplified it with all the COVID issues. Loss of relationships, loss of jobs, isolation from family or friends, inability to travel, fear about the future. And because it's not pleasant, we run away from it. And there's the idea of the wounded healer. And we're all wounded. And we're also all healers. Because we always have the capacity to heal ourselves, to turn towards what we might initially resist, and to lean into it a little bit, gently, slowly, so we don't choke or overwhelm ourselves. And the word heal is important because it is the wound that's calling for the healing. If there weren't wounds or pain or disappointment or hurt or suffering, we wouldn't have to endure it. And mindfulness brings us into this intimacy with these matters of the heart. And initially we can just breathe into it. And yes, it can be uncomfortable because we're not sure what's there, if it's going to hurt us again. We're going to go over the story for the 514th time and get into a blame game or judgmental or self-criticism or stories about if only. We get caught up and dragged into the past. And that simply doesn't work. It's not helpful. It's just looping space. So when we lean in, we're feeling into what can seem like an unknown, a vast space. It can feel a little heavy and dark and scary. And again, we can rely on the fact that whatever's happened to us, we've survived. We're all here. You're a survivor. This is not to minimize the impacts of whatever's happened in the past and the pains. It's in fact to acknowledge it, because hidden in that darkness, in the silence, we listen. And we can ask ourselves two questions whenever we're stuck or dark or lost, confused, overwhelmed. And the first question is, where am I stuck? Without jumping to conclusions or trying to fix it, where am I stuck? What am I being hung up on? What do I need to let go of? Just a simple question, where am I stuck? And again, the words may not come easily because initially the question is not why am I stuck, it's where am I stuck? It's a feeling, it's a sense, it's a place, it's a time. So where am I stuck? And again, the language here is internal kind of language. This is not thinking or analyzing or understanding. We need to allow it to tell us what it wants to tell us. And each of us is going to have a different answer to that question, where am I stuck? And this is part of the journey that each of us does individually, because each of us has got a different inner curriculum. This is part of the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And to be inclusive, there were actually female knights and females in the story who played very important roles. And there's a line that goes something like, each knight has to enter the forest at a point of his or her own choosing. Because no one else can walk your path and you can't walk anyone else's path. So what in your heart, in your silence of the heart, is calling you? The language of the voice is the language of the heart. The voice of the heart is quiet. It whispers. The mind, thoughts and feelings, they shout. They have lots of arguments. They want to justify themselves. They want to hang on to their stories. Yada, 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 yada. And the heart just waits around for all of that to settle down so that what it has to say, it says in the spirit in which the heart can speak. So where are we stuck? And the second question, what's called for? Not what do I do, not analyze it, not ask why. All of that can come later. But if you haven't heard the message, there's nothing to analyze or understand. So what's called for? Perhaps it's not being so hard on yourself or others. Perhaps it's letting go of a story that no longer serves you. Perhaps it's slowing down. Perhaps it's noticing how exhausted you are trying to be perfect. Perhaps you recognize you've had enough of the blame game, even though you feel justified in blaming yourself or others. Whatever it is, just listen. And a lot of this inner transformation starts with that permission and intention. We come back again and again to those two important words. Permission and intention to listen to where you're stuck and to listen to the answer for what's called for. And this often involves a letting go. And in the act of letting go comes more fear, because we've been hanging on to these things for so long. They become part of us. We become attached to our stories, our ego, our identity, the way things were, the way we want them to be. And we recognize the fear of letting go. And in letting go, we also recognize that our hands, our hearts start opening to new possibilities. Because as long as I'm hanging on, my hands are not free to give something else or to receive. As long as we avoid the heart and we wall it off in the hopes of keeping us safe or not feeling the yucky feelings, we can't inhabit the space that's also in the silent heart. So we become comfortable feeling uncomfortable. I have a good friend who said to me many years ago when I was going through a tough time, He said, be gentle and curious. Just be gentle and curious. Very wise words. Don't rush into judgment and fixing and lists and analysis. And the thinking comes later. So we've lent into it. We recognize we need to create space by letting go. And from the heart, comes the ingredients required for healing. And your ingredients for healing will be informed by where you were stuck and what's called for. And again, it's not always easy to find the words because the heart speaks gently in whispers. The analogy I use is that every emotion, every feeling is just a message. It's an invitation. It might initially seem unpleasant, but hidden in the unpleasantness is the wish. Where are you stuck? Well, I'm really hungry. Oh, what's called for? I guess I need to find some food. Wow, it's really hot today. I'm really not enjoying this heat. Very unpleasant. What's called for? You find some ways of cooling off. So when the heart might be feeling isolated and lonely, what's called for is reconnection. Perhaps reconnection to your authentic true self. Perhaps reconnection with relationships that have been lost. Or perhaps letting go of relationships which have died. What's called for might be forgiveness, forgiving, allowing yourself the space for your current and future life to show up. First, you have to let go of what was because it's already gone. Maybe it's permission and intention to find more joy. Because of despondency, we want more joy. Because of sadness, we want more feeling alive. Just need to lean into whatever's unpleasant just a little bit, and it provides the very answer that we're looking for. It's the turning point. Perhaps when we see ugliness in the world, we want to bring beauty. When we see war, we want peace. Perhaps we're at war with ourselves, in which case neither of you are going to win. We want a feeling of being fully alive. The thinking mind will go into questions of what's the meaning of life, what's important, what's my purpose. And it doesn't come up with many answers. Joseph Campbell was asked this question by Bill Moyers in the PBS series of some 20 years ago. So what's the meaning of life? And Joseph Campbell said, I don't believe that people are interested in the meaning of life. They want an experience of being alive. Forget the meaning. So what inside of you wants to come alive and show up in different ways that lead to fill in the blank, find your own word, happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, significance, thriving, flourishing, blossoming. I was in a classroom of grade 2 children some years ago, and having them experience some mindfulness at their level. And I said, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. So I'm going to ask you, the first question is, who thinks it's better to be mean than kind? Not a single hand went up. Who thinks it's better to be kind than mean? Every single hand went up enthusiastically. The grade 2 kids have not had lessons in moral philosophies going back 2,500 years. They've not studied at the feet of the Greek philosophers, or Lao Tzu, or the Buddha, or the Jewish prophets. They just know it. It's better to be kind. In the Buddhist traditions, they talk about the 4 stations of the heart. Sometimes they call the divine abodes, 4 of them. The first is compassion. We use that to meet suffering. In fact, the word compassion means to be with. Passion comes from the word pathos, pathology, suffering. Passion is not lust at its root. It's suffering, to be with suffering, compassion. That's the first station. The second is sympathetic joy. So to allow ourselves to experience joy and to share in the joy of others. S-Y-M, sympathy, to be with. So sympathetic joy. The third is loving kindness, or good wishes, or just kindness, because that never goes to waste. There's no downside to kindness. And then the fourth is equanimity, a sense of balance and inner wisdom, to know which of the other 3 to do when. And this stuff doesn't come from intellect. This stuff comes from the grade 2 heart, from the core of our being, from wisdoms beyond words. And it's hidden in the place of the wounding. It's right there. And with practice, we become more adept and skilled at getting there a little more quickly. We let go a little more quickly. We open the space a little more quickly. Not in a hurry, not to bypass it, not to deny it or minimize it. And as we come into contact with all parts of our inner world, we can see how these exist side by side. Day defines night and night defines day. There are two quotes from Carl Jung, the psychologist. He said, "You are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to become." You are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to become. You can see the wisdom of the flow there from the past into the present. You are, and then that flow into the future, who you choose to become, the power of choice and intention and permission. He also said, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Because of the darkness, we want to light candles. So many traditions and rituals across the world use candles as part of their practices or ceremonies or prayers or worship. We light incense to enjoy fragrances. We hold hands in a circle. We sing together. We sob together. We open our hearts together. And when we open our hearts and we listen to what they have to offer, we feel more integrated and complete. We feel more harmonious. Things feel a little more balanced. And when we feel more balanced inside, we do a better job of navigating the wobbly world out there. And as we bring this sit to a close, just to have one word as an anchor that you'll carry with you this evening and through the next while, because there's probably one matter of importance, one core issue for each of us that we can work on, that's calling our attention, that we can bring our openness and our love and our kindness and gentility and beauty and patience and joy and love and all of it to that wound. For some of us, there's a number of items on the curriculum. And if there are, prioritize them. And often if you find that you're healing one part, you're healing another part. When we slow down, we become more kind and patient automatically. When we look for peace, we automatically become less irritable. When we look for joy, it automatically softens sadness. When we provide comfort, it automatically eases discomfort. So every door is the right door. And every door leads to the heart. And whatever's important for you that you've discovered or rediscovered tonight, remembered, you'll carry it. You don't need to worry about forgetting it, because the heart doesn't forget important things. So expanding your attention a bit to the breath and the lungs around the heart. Taking a couple of longer, purposeful breaths. Just following that relaxing breath on the way out. And if your eyes have been closed, just watching for that moment when they decide they're going to open. Because the heart knows when's the right time to start looking out at the world again. Literally and metaphorically. I'm almost afraid to spoil it by talking about it. It's like slicing into a cake. You want to just look at it for a while longer. The notes are going to be posted on the website. Experience is much more important. So because the mind is always interested in representing what we experienced in language and words. I'll be brief. I've got a couple of quotes. We live, half of us, the eyes are looking outwards, the five senses are looking outwards to the world to interact with the world. Hearing, sight, smell, touch, taste. Because it helps us navigate, it helps us survive. It has a usefulness in terms of the practical. And then there's the interior, our lives, the interior spaces, which carry all our experiences that we've been through in our lives, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And we have a tendency to pay attention to the yucky stuff because we want to avoid it because it can be harmful. We don't want to pat rattlesnakes. We don't want to walk up to bears. It would be stupid to do so. So we have a tendency to weigh more and pay more attention to yucky stuff, no matter what it is. That's the instinct, fight or flight or freeze. The internal world, and we all have it, and I don't define these words. I don't define the word heart or spirit or soul, because they're different meanings, because for each of us, those words land differently. But everybody knows something of what this refers to inside of them. Whether it's heart or spirit or soul, it doesn't matter. And some of you might have heard me say this before, but the word soul can be very loaded. If you happen to be an adherent of a religion that believes in a God, the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and you have the experience of that God's given you a soul. It's here for this human lifetime. What happens afterwards, there are various understandings or beliefs. You can use soul in that way, because people say, what would God want me to do? What is my work on earth? We've all seen the bumper stickers. What would Jesus do? And the other ones, what would Buddha do? Or what would Brahman do? They're all there. It's the same thing. It works the same. If you are not a theist, soul can be used in the way that Carl Jung uses it, when he talks about the deepest part of us, the genuine, authentic self. Beyond the external identity, your name, your position, your bank account number, the photograph on your passport. Beyond all that, there's a part of us inside that we can get in touch with. What gets us out of bed in the morning? It's the part of us that has us choosing to do whatever we do in life. It's a font, it's an energy, it's a source. It's at the heart of who we are. For some people, it's going to be an artist. For some people, they're going to be artists and athletes. Other people are going to be doctors or musicians or whatever. It doesn't matter. Some people say that that's a calling. It's what you need to do. It's what you cannot not do. What are you called to do? And that answer comes from inside. And so going inside, there's valuable information. And as I mentioned already, there's this tendency, there's all this yucky stuff. The pain, the sorrow, the hurt, the disappointment, the confusion, the loss, the grief, the tiredness, the confusion, the fear, you name it. It's like, I don't want to go there. I'm overwhelmed. But unless we go there and we meet it gently and kindly and compassionately and patiently, we can't work with it. Unless we actually touch our foot and look at the thorn when we've walked barefoot in a field and there's a thorn in your big toe and you go, ouch. Unless you look at that thorn and you go, I need to take this out because I can't walk. And if I leave it long enough, it might get infected. And you know it's going to be painful initially, but you've got to do it because you can't leave it in. The price is too high for not accessing that, for not doing the healing. The price is high. So we go in, we lean into it, and we have that experience in the sit. We lean into it, and we just hold that space, and become comfortable feeling uncomfortable with it. And if it's too much and too hard, too fast, and you can't do this on your own, that's why there are mental health therapists out there. Because sometimes you do need, if it's infected, you're going to need to go to the doctor. And they might have to freeze your toe, and you might have to get antibiotics and all of that stuff. So sometimes you can't do this on your own. So knowing when you need help is important. So when we go inside, what we find inside are aspects of ourselves. I've said all this already, really. And the language of silence is very different. There's a number of books on silence, actually. I know 4 books on silence. I've read 3 of them, and there are probably even more. And I can't remember who said this, but silence, as you saw, silence isn't nothing. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. Initially, when we look in the dark, you can't see things because your eyes haven't adjusted. And then sometimes if you go outside in the night, you've been in a bright room and you go outside, you can't see the stars. And then after a few minutes, your eyes adjust and you can begin to see your way, where things are in the darkness. So silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. We just need to wait, because the language of the heart or the spirit or the soul is not in usual language. It's a sense, it's a feeling, it's a visualization, it's an awareness, it's an intuition. Maybe it's an aha moment. Again, I've shared this story sometimes with folks. So I was a pediatrician, as Leslie mentioned. I'd done a residency and passed my exams. I could have joined a number of practices in the city here in Calgary in 1993. And something was wrong. I wasn't excited. Everyone was excited for me. Allan, you're done, well done. And you must be happy, no more being on call every 4th night at the hospital. I wasn't happy. And it took me a month. Now, I could have ignored the unhappiness and that yucky feeling inside. I could have ignored it and just gone, nah. I'll just be a pediatrician. I would have been a competent pediatrician, passed my exams, but I wouldn't have been a happy one. So I came home and I said to my wife, I want to be a psychiatrist. She said, oh. So you've got to do another residency. And I said, yes. She said, if that's what you need to do, do it. She said, on one condition, you can't do a 3rd residency, because if you do it, it better be orthopedics, because I'm going to break every bone in your body. But we both understood the price of not doing it would have been too much. The price of not doing it is too much. We often think of the fear that holds us back from doing something new, but there's a price to not doing it. So I went back and I did another residency and nights on call and another set of exams and all of that. So those kind of crises come up, and they're not to be wasted. Don't waste a good crisis. So silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. Howard Thurman, who was a mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. and was also a pastor, he was a friend of Martin Luther King Sr., who was a minister as well. Howard Thurman said, in the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whispers of the heart. In the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whispers of the heart. T.S. Eliot said, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive at the place we started and see it for the first time. We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring, we will arrive at the place we started and see it for the first time. This is coming back again and again and again and again and again. I came across a quote the other day. I listen and I hear the silence. I listen and see the silence. I listen and taste the silence. I listen and smell the silence. I listen and embrace the silence. mindful listening, we have attended to the silence of the heart. Leslie will help us through the rest of this. And I see there's a comment in the chat room already there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll start with the question that's in the chat and give the audience members time to come up with your questions. So the first question in the chat is, do we need to start with the assumption that we are stuck in order to grow?
No, we don't need to start with that assumption. The reason I said that is that many people may not recognize they're stuck. So for some people, I don't know if it's many or lots, to bring to awareness mindfully that they might be stuck. Many people are sort of further along in the practice where they catch it really early and they don't get stuck anymore. They're able to see the pothole in the road and not step into it. They're able to catch it early enough so that they don't have to get back out of the hole that they've fallen into. So for some people, they're already in a flow. For some people, they're already in a flow. What do I mean by stuck? It's a great question. Thank you. The word stuck can be very, very subtle. It can be as subtle as noticing that little hint of frustration or disappointment that there's a little more traffic than you'd like on the way home this evening. It can be very subtle. I don't like this. Stuck can be, oh boy, I've just rolled down the window of my car and yelled at the driver next door and given them a rude gesture with my hand for the 10th time this month. I've really got an anger issue, and everything in between. So stuck is not always something huge and big. It comes up in very subtle ways. And by listening inwards, we notice when these more subtle things start to show up. One of the genius, or the aspects of genius of the Buddha, was that the Buddha really cut through these teachings when he said, suffering is everywhere and it's so subtle. There's something nice, you want more of it, we call that attachment and clinging. Or this isn't nice, I don't want it, we call that aversion or hatred. So we get drawn towards the yummy stuff and we don't want the yucky stuff. And it can be very, very subtle. And how do we know when might be a little bit of something to work on? Whenever you get emotional. Whenever you notice a little something coming up. The music's a little too loud. I wish they weren't playing tennis next door. Why are we so close to Crowchild Trail? If only more people showed up live. Why are there more people on Zoom? It shows up in 100 ways. Because what I'm doing there is I'm reacting to the outside world. When in reality, it's got nothing to do with me. The fact that people are playing tennis is irrelevant. The fact that there's noise from Crowchild Trail, the fact that some people are at home, it's got nothing to do with me.
I'm just looking, it says you can't hear you, but
Ooh.
nobody else wrote that, so maybe we should check in with them.
Oh, there we go. Thank you for describing stuckness. Most helpful, especially the ideas that it can be small and subtle. The sound is better now. Thank you.
Allan, I have a question for you, if I might. First of all, that was a beautiful meditation. Really, really was. And I really think you spoke to the heart of mindfulness. It's bringing heart to what is present. But But there's something that has sort of stuck with me. Carl Jung says, can you repeat his quote, please?
As far as we can discern, that one, or the one about you are not what happened to you, you are who you choose to become?
Right. So, and I think this really comes back to the point of stuckness, and it comes back to the point of how we are present with what is going on, and as you have talked about, wounding. The reality is we are what was chosen for us. Who we are as a personality was determined by our attachment to our parents, and that created our personality, our persona, a sense of not being good enough, in essence, not being loved, not feeling safe. So I think all of us start life as being stuck with a persona that was given to us, and we did not choose. And I think that the vast majority of us die without the realization that we are stuck. So the question is, why is it so hard to approach who we are? And this is the question that's coming to you. What is it that gives compassion to what is in pain? Our mindful awareness is what offers compassion to our sense of self. The problem is we identify with the sense of self. So how can what is offering compassion offer compassion if it's the same as what is in pain? And the question then is, how do we get around the point of identifying with who we believe we are? And I know for myself that realizing it's my wounded child that is saying, it's too noisy out there, or I'm not good enough. If I can bring compassion to the sense of my wounded child, then I have the capacity of opening my heart. So what do you think of that as a strategy to approach our uncomfort, our suffering, our dukkha?
I think you've given us, Phil, some teachings there, which I didn't touch on. I think you've also partly answered your own, or the questions, not your questions, I think they're questions we all have. That, and trying to pull some threads together here. We are what happened to us if we believe that that defines us. And I have a friend who's writing another book. The book's not published yet, but I had the opportunity to read the book. And this friend said there are three things that trauma will do to us, the 3Ds. We all know this. It can either destroy me completely, we fall apart, it's just too much. It can define me. So this is, Jung spoke about the wound identified, that some people believe because I'm being wounded, and this isn't to minimize trauma or violence or none, it's not minimizing it, but that defines who you are. Or we can use it to develop ourselves. Destroy, define, or develop. Now what happens is, as you said rightly, Phil, there in the teaching you just gave, was because we feel our feelings so intimately, they're visceral, it's right here, especially the adrenaline stuff, the fight, the flight, the freeze, the anger. And because the thoughts go, yes, the blame, it's either my fault or someone else's. When you're a kid, it's either your fault or someone else's. And often when you're a kid, what happens is if horrible stuff happens, you can't blame the world because you rely on the world. You rely on your parents or your neighborhood or your teachers or your coaches. You rely on them. You can't blame them. You have to believe in them. So there's only one other place where the blame can go, and so it goes inwards. So we don't feel good enough. The first word the toddler learns is no. Don't touch mommy's things. And then you go to school, and for 12 years, you get a freaking report card on every aspect of yourself 4 times a year. Are you kidding me? No wonder we walk, and you're not good enough in this, and you're not trying hard enough in that. Well, how many of us are good enough at everything? So for 12 years, you get a report card that becomes public. And so we define it, we wrap ourselves around this, and that's our identity. But that's not who we are. That's just an external report card. So what you said, Phil, and what I said was this mindfulness brings us into understanding how the mind works, how we identify with ourselves, with the story. And the beauty of this is that we can say, you know what? I'm done. I'm not letting this destroy me or define me anymore. There's a lot of work to do in developing the self, the third D. But there's some sense of internal agency that I don't have to let this define myself anymore. I'm done. For a simple reason. The old stories are boring. We've gone over them 400 times and they don't feel good. But we get stuck in the loops because we may not feel worthy enough to be worthy of changing. I can't do this. We've got shame and doubt. We've got guilt. We don't trust ourselves, or if we've really, really been traumatized, we don't trust the world either. There's no trust anywhere. So at the very early stages in the first year of life, you've got to have some trust. You've got to be able to say, I'm okay. You have to get enough messages that you're okay enough to be able to then have some agency in the world and move and believe in yourself. But some people haven't got enough of that. And so they get really stuck, and they get stuck in the body because a lot of trauma happens before you've got language even, the first 2, 3, 4 years of life. So what happens is stuff gets triggered emotionally, and then you're just in survival mode. So the last 10, 15 years, a lot of research and attention has come out into trauma-informed therapy and trauma therapy, and a lot of behavioral dysregulation, a lot of mood disorders, attention deficit, addictions, you name it. The connections to trauma are just huge, and the research supports it. And you asked about 3 questions, and I threw together about 6 ideas. I don't know if I've covered all your questions enough.
I think, no, I'm just telling.
Oh, okay.
You can admit.
Oh, okay.
Allan, I think that was just a great summary and discussion about the fact that that's what I think the essence of it is.
Yeah.
Very nicely stated.
And mindfulness, again, that intention and permission, or just intention and permission to ask yourself, what's going on? Why am I reacting this way? What's this about?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I still see a therapist, and she, and I've seen a number of therapists in my life, and I think it's a wonderful thing because I practice what I preach, but she often says to me, so Allan, whose issue is this? And I know what she means by that, because sometimes we're carrying stuff from our families. We're carrying stuff from our siblings or our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents. We're carrying legacy stuff in genetics. So she's saying to me, whose is this? Say, nah, this is mine. I own this. I'll say, you know what, Katie? This might be my mother's or her father's. And then we work with that. And I recognize it and I say, this isn't mine. Thank you, little Allan. I talk about little Allan and little Phil. Little Allan, I say, this isn't mine. I picked it up when I was young, but you know what? I don't want to carry this anymore because it's not mine. I've got enough Allan stuff going on. So I gently invite the mother that lives in me, my mother that lives in me, and I say, Mom, you too can let go of this. I'm going to model for you that this wasn't your fault either, Mom, because this came from your dad. This particular issue I can think of. And in that way, I take some sense of agency, and I give my mom, who lives in me, permission for her to let go of it. There's a whole school or a whole set of practices within family therapy. I learned this stuff in family therapy, where it's called the internalized other. There's a version of my mother that lives in me, either by modeling or by her stories or what I watched, or it's in my genetics. Half of my genetic material comes from my mother. And so I can work through that stuff that isn't even mine, but we pick it up. We pick up the wounding of the world all the time. And we can't fix that. Charity starts at home. It all starts here, and then we go out and we move in the world.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
How do you reconcile all this talk about I and self with the concept of Allan?
How do I
Can you
reconcile?
repeat the question?
Yes, how do I reconcile all this talk of the self with anatta? Now, anatta is a concept that is no self. We make concessions with language to talk about the self. So Allan is a construct. It's a name I was given. I could just as easily have been called Martha or Johnny. Who cares? My date of birth is arbitrary, but it's important because it's got to match my driver's license and my passport and my social insurance number. I need to have credentials in the wall to be able to practice my profession. So there's a utility, but that is a story and it's a construct. But when we look at it, it's all just a construct. It's a story that serves a function, but it's not who I am. And my understanding and my readings and sitting through retreats and stuff is the idea of not self is there's no fixed, permanent, unchanging self. That's my interpretation of what is the idea of no self, because everything is impermanent. Every skin cell actually flakes off over 7 days. Every red blood cell that carries oxygen in our blood gets turned over every 120 days. The liver keeps regenerating itself. Heart muscle grows if it's damaged. Everything is impermanent. So it's not a reconciliation. I think it's a recognition that both of these things exist. That's the yin yang for me. That there is a self that has to be a construct to operate and move in the world in a utilitarian, practical way. And at the same time, inside of me, there are these stories, constructs, ideas, which are open to flux and change. The idea of identity. And a few years ago, I gave a presentation at a university, day-long, on professional identity. And the whole of my topic was, there's no such thing as identity. And everybody went, well, what do you mean? And I just said that identity is a construct. Because if we think about it, the word identity, who am I? The word identity is related to identify with. What do I identify with? Or what do I identify as? That is a story, which may, as Phil has said, be inherited or given or genetic based on where we grew up, the country we grew up in, the religion, our parents, our geography, our heritage, our religions. So we were given that. That is our fate.
I'm just wondering who's suffering in oneself?
Well, what,
And
who's suffering? The constructed self, the ego. The ego is and that is the whole thing about the Buddha, that when we awaken to the idea that there is no fixed, permanent, unchanging self, there's no I that suffers anymore. There's no more clinging. There's no more aversion. We awaken to that reality that everything is in flux. Now that can sound scary. What do you mean there isn't a me? Oh my goodness, you mean I'm nothing? No. That's not what we're saying. And in that terror is the possibility of reconstructing, recreating, rebirth, retreat, movement, change, flow. And Tom's a wonderful friend. I've known Tom since I came to Calgary. We've known each other 36 years. Tom's one of my gurus because he always asks me these wonderfully challenging questions, and we sit together and yeah, this is tough stuff. Yes, please.
I have a question. I'm wondering if you can please give me some words, ideas, or tools for identifying where one can be stuck and where that's a calling for who I want to be or what I'm supposed to be.
Wow, the computer's chuckling. So the question live here was, have I got some ideas or words or tools for identifying where you're stuck and then to go from there? It's a fabulous question. And thanks, because I'm keeping it on the time and it's almost the summary of the take home for this evening. When you have a sense that something's a little off, and it can be subtle, there's a piece of something I need to work on. Mindfulness with intention will bring you into the present moment. You sit yourself down quietly without interruptions. You give yourself permission to drop in. You go inwards. You give yourself 3-4 minutes to settle the body, to the breath, and then to drop into that silence, that inner space where you're listening, and you create the space in which something emerges. It might be an image, it might be a thought, it might be a feeling, it might be an intuition. And just hold that space gently and openly and curiously. And something will come up. And the words above the neck will go, oh, that's what it is. Because if there is an element of stuckness, you can be sure for all of us, it keeps showing up again and again and again. So like I said in the sit, it could be impatience. It could be forgiving yourself. It could be perfectionism. It could be, gee whiz, I haven't thought about finding joy enough in my life. I haven't thought about doing anything about my loneliness. So drop in first, and you're not going to have it starts with that feeling. Words fail in the space. But the words are in service of what comes up. The thinking mind hasn't solved it, has it? When you say I'm stuck, and you go, and I say, what is it? And you go, I don't know. That's the thinking mind going, the thinking mind doesn't have the answer, because if it has the answer, you know it with words and language and cognition and thought. The fact that you go, I don't know, that's exactly the moment to go in quietly and listen. It takes practice. And then you may notice resistance, because you may notice there's something uncomfortable. And it may be below 3 levels. It may be down, maybe all the way to unworthiness from age 3 or 4. And that's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 decades ago. And now there's all these layers of defenses that you built up around it. You've compensated through doing or action or perfectionism or wanting to be loved or lists of achievement or bucket lists or whatever. And sometimes if you don't know, sit with it some more. And if it's important enough and you can't get there on your own, you can't identify it, talk with someone. Sometimes a good friend, a trusted friend, a family member is enough, because when you try to put words to it, you'll go, well, that's practicing going in and trying to find the words. But the answer's not coming from here, it's from down here. I want to be respectful of time.
Yeah.
One last question. I'm happy to stay, but I will, log off in 2 minutes.
The first place, thanks for your leading practice that is making me very stable and peaceful. Yeah, that is very good. And my curious is about when you're leading our practice, then what is in your mind? And you will change the different people or different situation with a different word to leading them, or you keep the same every times?
Yeah. So I think I heard 3 questions there, and I'll try and repeat them for my own sake and the folks online. So the comment from the audience was an experience of stability and peace, which is interesting, because that suggests that's what we're looking for when we're going in. And I spoke about tough stuff there. So in talking about the tough stuff, you were able to still find stability and peace. The second question I think I heard was, what's going on in my mind when I'm leading the practice? Actually, very little. If I were to do this again, I'd probably have a different script, but the framework would be the same. When I'm doing this, I'm going inwards, and the words are following where I'm going. So I always start with intention and permission. And then I go, okay, I'm going inwards. Okay, being present, permission, body, breath, heart. What are the issues around the heart? Where do we find them? It just comes. My mind is not doing it. My mind is in service of my experience. And because I've done this often enough. So I don't have a script. And if I had to do this all over again, I'd probably say the same thing in completely different words. The third question?
You change with different people?
No. If I were I've done things like this in high school classrooms. I may use less sophisticated language in a high school classroom. So I may not talk about compassion. I may not use the word soul so much. I may talk about your heart and what's important to you. I may use developmentally appropriate language. But in an adult setting, so whether it's this group, whether it's at the university, whether it's at a medical conference, whether it's the residents who are psychiatrists and they're training to be psychiatrists, whether it's at a teachers' convention, exactly the same language, because adults get this. This is universal. I don't have to change my language at all. And I trust that I've done this often enough, and I trust myself enough. And it took me years before I could do this, that I don't prepare for the meditation. The notes, I'll make the notes afterwards. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I wanted to acknowledge that there is a question that was unanswered.
Oh, yes.
But maybe we have to leave it for another night. But I wanted to know that, Carol, to know that we saw it is can broken hearts be healed? So I thought we'd take a poll from the audience. Do you believe, or have you had an experience of a broken heart, and was there some healing that became possible? Yes. So I would say we have a majority opinion.
And it depends on what you mean by healing, because remember that we can have serious wounds on our body. They'll heal. May not function 100% as it did before. There'll be a scar there. But can we become more functional? And the word healing and wholeness and health are all related. So it's about coming back to a condition of health and wholeness. Going back to the way things were. No, we can't.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I wanted to thank everyone for coming this evening, whether online or here. We've very much enjoyed being with you. We do look forward to our next meeting, at which I will be presenting on meditation technique, basically. So we're going to be learning some ways to become even more skillful at remaining on whatever our chosen object is. This is a very important skill in meditation. You're actually developing a certain part of your brain that holds attention on a single object. And so before you come, you may want to think about which objects you want to use. I'm going to teach it based on the breath, but you can use other objects, but kind of have in mind, I'm really good with listening, or I'm really good with feeling my body, or I'm going to use my breath. And then we'll work with that. And the reason it's so important is because through developing that capacity, we then are able to calm the mind, leading to the peace and stability that our friend in the audience spoke about. It's a gradual progression from one thing to the next. So I look forward to being with you then. And then the other thing is that we do invite you to assist us with cleanup, and there's chairs here to be put away. And then if you want to participate in some tasks like taking the garbage out, basically cleaning the counters and that kind of thing, just come to the front and we'll give you some guidance as to what we have to do at the end of the evening. Basically, we have to leave it the way it was when we came in. So again, it's been wonderful to be with you. See really people really interested in meditation, and we can share the joy we have in meditation as well. And also to our online friends, thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you either in person or online again. Okay, and we have a confirmation from somebody that they've been able to grow some healing in their heart as well. So
May it continue.
yes.